They called me at 3:17 a.m. Not a second earlier. Not a second later. I remember because I was dreaming of fire, of screams under stone, of a girl with no face standing at the foot of my bed, asking me something I didn't understand. Then my phone buzzed. The screen read unlisted call in all caps. Division 9 never used numbers. That was their way of saying, it's bad. Put your shoes on. I didn't ask questions. I never do anymore. Rain slapped the windows as I drove through D.C., the city a blur of wet neon and sleeping guilt. I took the entrance behind the National Archives. Plain concrete, no signage, just a retinal scanner and the faint smell of ozone. The security guard didn't speak. He just nodded once and handed me a plastic badge that read, Temporary Clearance, Room 9. That's when I knew it wasn't just a corpse. It was one of us. Room 9 was deeper than I liked, 4 levels below even the restricted archives. No cell reception. No echoes. The kind of silence that presses on your lungs. I walked the sterile hallway, the hum of the fluorescent lights syncing with the thud of my heartbeat. They were waiting for me. Agent Barrett stood outside the sealed door. Thick. Sweaty. Always smelled like gun oil and desperation. He gave me a nod, but didn't meet my eyes. Found him this morning, he muttered. Sensor triggered at 2:43. No one else went in. Who is it? I asked. Barrett hesitated, then said, Dr. Cullen. My stomach dropped. Cullen wasn't just any analyst. He was a sigil expert. Quiet. Brilliant. Used to teach me how to isolate latent demonic energy from ritual tools. I hadn't seen him in weeks. Barrett keyed in the code. The door hissed open. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Not rot. Not blood. It was copper and sulfur. Inside, the lights flickered dimly. Cullen lay crumpled in the center of the room, spine arched unnaturally, like something had bent him backward and left him to dry. His mouth was frozen in a scream, eyes missing, sockets burnt black like cigarette ends. But it was his back that stopped me cold. Someone, or something, had carved a sigil deep into his flesh. Not just carved. Etched. Ritualistic. Symmetrical. The edges glowed faintly, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. And I recognized it. I'd seen that symbol once. In a manuscript buried beneath the ruins of an Armenian monastery. A sigil too old for language. One that didn't belong to any known demonic hierarchy. The Vatican called it a dead mark, a signature of an entity that had never been summoned. Maltereth. I whispered the name without meaning to. It slipped out of me like a breath I didn't know I was holding. Barrett turned to me. What did you say? Nothing, I lied. I need the room. He left quickly. They always do when the lights start to flicker like that. I crouched beside Cullen, careful not to disturb the chalk lines smeared around him. His fingernails were torn and bloody. There were markings on the wall, scratched symbols repeating the same phrase again and again. I was never alone. I was never alone. I was never alone. I stood slowly, my head starting to throb. Something buzzed in the walls. A low hum. It felt like being underwater, sound bending the wrong way. And then the lights blew out. Not flickered. Not dimmed. They popped, one by one, until darkness swallowed the room. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then something moved behind me. Cold air swept across my neck. I turned. Nothing. But the humming grew louder, rising into a high-pitched ring like metal screaming. I stumbled back, hand brushing Cullen's chest, still warm. And that's when I saw it. My arm. A mark. Just like Cullen's. Burning. Faintly glowing. Etched right into my skin. I didn't scream. I wanted to. But I couldn't. Because deep in the dark, just above the ringing, I heard something whisper from the shadows. Welcome, vessel. And I knew then. I hadn't come here to study the demon. I'd come here to become part of its story. I woke up on the floor of the decontamination chamber, cold metal pressing into my cheek. The overhead lights buzzed like angry wasps, flickering in and out of rhythm. My head pounded like a drumbeat from a funeral march. I sat up slowly, dizzy. My body felt heavier than usual, like I'd aged 10 years in a few hours. My eyes burned, and the air tasted like burnt copper. Something wasn't right. The last thing I remembered was examining Agent Nolan's body, his twisted, broken form, the sigil carved into his spine, the smell of sulfur in the room. Then the lights went out, and a sharp pain bloomed in my chest. I thought it was a panic attack, maybe exhaustion. But this was different. I pulled off my shirt. My skin was clammy, sticky with sweat. And there, just above my heart, was a mark. No. It looked just like the one on Nolan's back. Burned into me. A jagged, ancient shape. Part circle, part claw, part something I didn't have a name for. The edges were raw, red, like it had just been seared in with fire. I didn't scream. I wanted to, but I'd seen worse things. I'd faced things that slithered through walls and whispered in the language of the dead. I knew what a demon's brand looked like. But why me? I stood up and turned toward the mirror in the chamber. My face looked the same. Tired. Haunted. A man with too many secrets behind his eyes. But my reflection didn't move. It just stared at me. Same face, same eyes. But it didn't copy me when I raised my hand. Then it smiled. My real hand gripped the sink edge. I blinked, and the mirror returned to normal. My reflection matched me again. Hallucination. That's what I told myself. A trick of the mind, probably caused by the stress. Or maybe by whatever cursed energy was leaking from that body. I grabbed my coat and rushed out of the chamber. Division 9 had always been silent, cold. But now it felt dead. No voices in the halls. No agents rushing past. Just the hum of distant machines and the buzz of the ceiling lights overhead. I passed Maya in the corridor. She was one of the few people in the building who didn't treat me like a freak. "You all right, Adam?" she asked. Her brows knitted together. "You look pale." "I just need coffee," I lied. "Long night." She gave me a weak smile, but her eyes lingered on my chest. "You're bleeding," she said. I looked down. The mark had started to leak. Thin lines of dark, almost black blood trickled from the edges. "Must have scratched myself on something," I muttered. Her expression changed. Not fear, but something close. Recognition. "You should see medical." "I will," I said. I wouldn't. I went straight to my private office. Locked the door. Pulled the blinds. My hands were shaking now. My thoughts were loud, crashing into each other like waves in a storm. Why did the demon choose me? Why now? I sat at my desk, opened my encrypted file archive, and searched one word, Maltareth. Dozens of redacted pages came up. Reports of missing teams. Failed exorcisms. Rituals that ended in fire and blood. Every report had something in common, the mark. The sigil wasn't just a sign. It was an invitation. A door. I leaned back in my chair. The room felt darker now, even though the lights were still on. My skin itched. My eyes throbbed. And in the corner of the room, near the filing cabinet, I saw something. A shape. Tall. Wrong. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. But I could feel it watching me. I blinked, and it was gone. That night, I didn't go home. I lay on the office couch, wrapped in my coat, gun under my pillow. But I didn't sleep. Because every time I closed my eyes, I saw the mark glowing, and heard a voice whispering from somewhere inside me. Not in words. In hunger. They told me Archive Black didn't exist. Even inside Division 9, where we catalog things like cursed coins, haunted lungs in glass jars, and exorcism footage from jungle temples, the idea of Archive Black was treated like a ghost story. A whisper passed in low voices between agents who'd seen too much. But I knew better. And now, with the mark burning under my skin, I needed answers. I stood alone in the service tunnel under the National Archives. The concrete hallway stretched like a throat, silent and cold, lit only by flickering maintenance lights. The place smelled of rust, mold, and something older, something sour and ancient, like the breath of a sealed tomb. I reached the end of the hallway. A rusted steel door stood there, unmarked, except for a faded handprint smeared in something dark and dry. Not blood. Not paint. Something else. I didn't ask. I swiped my clearance badge. Red light. Denied. I held up my marked forearm instead. The sigil pulsed once, hot, then cold, and the door clicked open. The room beyond was massive, stretching further than the blueprints suggested. Ceiling lost in shadow. Rows and rows of shelves, tall as buildings, packed with locked boxes, scroll tubes, mummified remains, chained books, even artifacts floating in tanks of yellow liquid. It felt like stepping into the forgotten mind of the world, a place where history came to rot in silence. As I moved deeper, the air changed. Thick. Still. Like underwater. Then I heard it, a scraping sound. Something dragging along metal. I froze. Just the shelves settling, I whispered, lying to myself. I found what I was looking for in section E17. Locked behind thick glass, a black dossier labeled Voss, Edward, terminated. I broke the glass with my elbow, ignoring the sting of sliced skin. Blood smeared across the folder as I opened it. Inside were surveillance photos, Edward in the Arctic Circle, standing before a stone altar covered in glyphs. Reports about failed summoning attempts. Pages of notes in Edward's handwriting. Runes drawn again and again. Phrases underlined. The mark is not punishment, it is selection. He who is marked shall see across veils. Maltareth does not arrive. He unfolds. I turned the page and stopped breathing. A security cam image showed Edward standing outside Division 9 HQ. The date stamp was last week. His eyes glowed faint white on the grainy screen. He was smiling. My heart pounded as the room seemed to tilt. He's alive. He's watching me. And he wants me to know it. Suddenly, every light in the archive flickered. Then cut out. Total darkness. I pulled out my flashlight, but before I could flick it on, I heard it again, scraping. Closer this time. Something breathing. Wet and ragged. I backed up slowly, crunching glass underfoot. My flashlight clicked on and revealed the path behind me. Empty shelves. But on one of them, a candle had appeared. Flickering. Burning black. I didn't put it there. It wasn't there before. And underneath it, in burned lettering on the wood, "You were chosen before you were born." I ran. All the way back down the tunnel. But the worst part? As I passed the steel door, I saw something staring from the dark behind it. It looked like me. But it wasn't. I stood alone in the cold, humming silence of the war room. Maps, files, and blood-stained photos were scattered across the metal table like a jigsaw puzzle I wasn't meant to finish. Every victim we'd found in the last 6 weeks had the same mark, etched, branded, or rotting into their flesh like something old had claimed them. And now I wore it too. I didn't know what it meant yet. But I knew this much: it wasn't just a curse. It was a message. A blueprint. I grabbed a marker and started drawing circles over the printed maps, locations of the attacks. Baltimore, Richmond, Arlington, all of them surrounded DC, like teeth around a throat. That's when I noticed the pattern. It wasn't random. The locations were placed like points on a ritual circle, one designed to contain or summon something massive. I'd seen similar structures in ancient grimoires, used by cults to either trap demons or bring them through. This wasn't containment. This was a doorway. I felt a tremor in my fingers as I drew the final line connecting the points. The circle was complete, and I was right in the center of it. Washington, D.C. wasn't just the target. It was the altar. I leaned against the wall, trying to calm my breathing. Sweat prickled down my neck. My mind flashed back to the last body I'd examined, Agent Colby. His eyes had been turned to ash in their sockets. His mouth stitched shut by something not human. On his palm had been the mark. The same one on my arm now. I looked at it again. The sigil pulsed faintly, like it was breathing. Like it was alive. It hadn't stopped since the exorcism at St. Jude's. That night, something passed into me. I thought it was just backlash. A psychic wound. But this was deeper. More personal. I could feel it sometimes, like a whisper just behind my thoughts. A presence watching me. Waiting. And worse than that, guiding me. I went to the archives again. Not the public ones above ground, the hidden vaults below. Archive black. No guards. Just a single retinal scanner, and a hallway that always smelled like old smoke and ozone. The deeper I went, the colder it got, until my breath came out in mist. The lights flickered as I passed between shelves of forbidden books, many bound in things I didn't want to name. One of them, Corpus Thalvor, mentioned Maltareth. Just once. A footnote. But enough to tell me this wasn't just a demon. It was a memory eater. A being that fed not on bodies, but on time, identity, history. People near it didn't just die, they were erased. Their families forgot them. Their names vanished from databases, as if they never existed at all. I remembered something Edward once said, years ago, before he disappeared. True power isn't in fire or death. It's in silence. Oblivion. The kind that makes God forget your name. He knew about Maltareth. Maybe he summoned it. Maybe he is it now. A cold wind slithered through the archive. The bookshelves groaned. One book fell off the shelf behind me. No one else was here. I turned. It was a journal. A leather-bound one, cracked and dry, like it had been touched by fire long ago. Inside, the writing was messy, frantic. It was Edward's. My fingers trembled as I flipped the pages. Most were drawings of the sigil. Some were of faces I didn't recognize, half melted or twisted. But then I found a page with a sketch of me. It was rough, but the eyes were right. My eyes. The caption under it chilled me more than the cold ever could. Subject: Adam. The vessel is forming correctly. My knees nearly buckled. I backed away, the journal slipping from my hands, pages flapping like wings. Vessel? I wasn't hunting a demon anymore. I was becoming its shell. And the worst part, a piece of me deep buried and afraid was starting to want it. Want to know what it feels like to forget your name, to stop being Adam Raines, and become something else, something older, something marked. The church was nothing more than a husk. Its roof sagged like the spine of a dying animal, and the stained glass windows were mostly shattered, jagged pieces still clinging like broken teeth. Moss coated the stone walls, and the air inside was thick, damp, sour, like old breath that had been trapped for years. I held my flashlight low, sweeping it across the floorboards. They creaked under my boots, screaming out with each step. A rusted cross hung sideways on the far wall, its base eaten by rot. This place hadn't seen a sermon in decades. But I wasn't here to pray. Edward used to come here. That much I knew. I found a torn record from one of his old field logs, marked Sanctum Number 3. Coordinates had led me here. If the sigil was a puzzle, this place was another corner piece. I passed the pulpit. The pages of a Bible lay scattered and soaked near it, as if someone had tried to rip the word itself out of the place. My flashlight flickered once, then again. Not now. Please, not now. The beam returned. I moved behind the altar, scanning the floor. Nothing. Just dust and decay. Then I noticed something. A nail sticking out of the floorboard, shiny, new, untouched by rust. I knelt down and tugged it. The floor groaned and gave. A square hatch popped open. My throat tightened. A staircase lay beneath, swallowed by shadow. Carved into the wood above it was a symbol, a variation of the sigil burned into my own flesh, but older, less refined. Primitive. I didn't hesitate. I couldn't afford to. I went down. The smell hit me halfway down the stairs. Wax. And something sweet, something foul. Like burnt sugar mixed with rot. The narrow stairwell opened into a circular room carved from stone. The air was warmer here, like the room was alive and breathing. My light hit the far wall, and that's when I saw them. Candles. Hundreds. Maybe thousands. Each one sat neatly on a metal shelf carved into the stone, their flames low and steady. No wax dripped. No smoke twisted upward. They just burned. Quietly. Patiently. I walked slowly, heart thudding in my ears. Then I saw the tags beneath them. Each candle had a name. Full names. Some I recognized, agents who'd vanished over the years. Others, I didn't. But they weren't random. Every name was recorded. My hands trembled as I scanned shelf after shelf, drawn by something I couldn't explain. Then I saw it. Raines Adam. My breath caught. The candle was smaller than the rest. Its flame flickered violently. I reached out without thinking, fingers hovering near it. It pulsed as if it recognized me. Then the room shifted. I turned sharply, but no one was there. The flame dimmed. A whisper brushed my ear. Not a voice, but something darker, something deeper. I spun again, and that's when I saw them. Figures. Dozens of them. Standing along the walls, barely visible. Their skin was waxy. Their eyes empty. Some were burned. Others had mouths sewn shut. One of them was Maya. Her lips still twisted in that final, frozen scream. Her eyes were bleeding black. My knees buckled. I fell back. The candle with my name flared. And from every corner of the chamber came the same whisper, spoken by dozens of mouths in perfect sync. You are a vessel. I scrambled to my feet. The flame on my candle twisted into a thin black spiral. You are a vessel. They stepped closer. Their bare feet made no sound. Just the hiss of wax dripping from their limbs to the cold floor. You were chosen before the womb. The mark is not a curse. It is an invitation. I backed toward the stairs, my flashlight shaking in my grip. Adam, one of the figures said. Not in unison. Alone. A voice I knew. A voice I hated. Edward. He stepped from the shadows, wearing a gray coat stained with something darker than blood. His smile was gentle. Kind even. You found it, he said. Good. That means you're ready. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Edward tilted his head. You feel it now, don't you? The hunger. The door in your skin opening just a crack. I turned and ran. Up the stairs, through the hatch, out the broken church doors, and into the cold night air. But as I ran, I heard them behind me whispering one final thing. The candle only goes out when you do. And when I looked at my arm, the mark was glowing. I hadn't slept in 2 days. Every time I closed my eyes, the whispers came back, low, gurgling voices that spoke in a tongue I didn't know, but somehow understood. They weren't in the room with me. They were inside, crawling around the back of my skull like insects. I sat on the cold metal bench in the isolation wing, my arm wrapped in bandages, still burning beneath from the sigil. Maya sat across from me, reading from a red, leather-bound book. Her eyes darted across the pages like she was racing death. Maybe she was. "Your mark," she said, without looking up. "It's not just a curse. It's a doorway. A key." "I figured," I muttered, pressing a palm to my forehead. I was shaking again. "Can you remove it?" She hesitated. "You don't remove something like this, Adam. You either seal it, or let it finish what it started." The lights in the room flickered once. Then again. I looked at the ceiling. "Don't tell me the backup generator's failing again." "No, that's not the generator," Maya whispered. She had stopped reading. Her hands clutched the book so tight I could hear the leather creak. A soft breeze blew through the sealed room. There were no windows. No vents. Then the air shifted. It smelled like sulfur and damp wood. Like something that had crawled out of a centuries-old crypt. I stood up slowly. "Maya?" Her eyes were wide. She stared through me like she was watching something over my shoulder. And then her lips moved. But it wasn't her voice. "You cannot unmark what was chosen before the stars were born." The words rumbled out of her, low and hollow, like something deep underwater was speaking through a broken pipe. I froze. "Maya, snap out of it. You're stronger than this." "Adam Raines," the voice interrupted. Her eyes rolled back until only the whites showed. She stood, stiff and shaking, her neck jerking like a puppet on broken strings. "He watches through your eyes. He speaks through your blood. You are never hunting the demon. You are the path it walks." I stepped back. My legs hit the bench. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But I stood still, staring at her as the air around us grew thicker, heavier. Maya suddenly gasped, like she'd been pulled out of deep water. She clutched her chest and collapsed to her knees, coughing black fluid onto the floor. I rushed forward, catching her before she hit the ground. She looked up at me. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I saw him," she whispered. "Edward. He's changed. Not human anymore. His skin is wrong. And his voice." She choked, more black sludge spilling from her lips. Her body began to seize. I screamed for help. Banged on the metal door. No response. Her eyes locked with mine one last time. "Don't trust the mirrors." Then her body went still. The room felt colder. I laid her down gently, trembling. The book had fallen beside her. Pages wet with blood and ink. My reflection in the shiny floor tiles shimmered strangely. I looked down, and my reflection smiled. I didn't. The mark on my arm pulsed. Hot. Alive. Edward had spoken. Through Maya. But worse than his voice was the feeling he'd left behind. I wasn't just being watched anymore. I was being guided. And the hand on my shoulder was no longer mine. I sat in the briefing room alone, the fluorescent light above me flickering like it was nervous too. The air smelled like dust and burnt coffee. My hands were trembling, even though I kept them flat on the table, pretending they weren't. Across from me, a manila folder lay unopened. Thick. Heavy. Marked restricted level black. My name was written in red on the label. My stomach tightened just seeing it. I knew something was wrong the moment I found it waiting for me on my desk. No signature, no sender. Just that seal. And I was right to be afraid. When I opened it, the first page hit me like a hammer. Project Exile, codename, Maltareth Integration Protocol. Lead researcher, Edward Voss. Supervising agent, Director Marla Yates. My blood went cold. I flipped the pages quickly, my breath growing short. Dates. Diagrams. Ritual scripts disguised as neurological blueprints. A timeline of failed human trials. All stamped with Division IX's clearance codes. And then near the bottom, my name. Adam Raines. Assigned, post-rupture monitoring. I wasn't just studying demons. I was part of the experiment. My hands curled into fists. They lied to me. Everything Edward had whispered, about how the Division wanted to control demons, not destroy them, it was true. He hadn't gone rogue. He'd followed orders. The door creaked behind me. I didn't turn around. I already knew who it was. Director Marla Yates. Her heels clicked across the tile like gunshots. She sat across from me, cool as ever, her sharp gray suit matching the cold in her eyes. "You read it," she said calmly. I looked at her, unable to speak. My throat was too tight. It was classified for a reason. "You used me," I said, voice low, cracked. "You used all of us." She didn't flinch. "We were trying to protect this country. Do you understand what Maltareth is?" What it can do. Do you know what the Russians unleashed in 2012 in that Siberian void? I stared at her. She leaned in. Edward was the only one who understood how to speak to it. We didn't lose him. We sent him in. He volunteered. My head was spinning. The mark on my arm itched like it was burning beneath my skin. And what about me? Was I just a lab rat? A container? Her lips pressed into a thin line. You were chosen, Adam. Your background, your experience, your trauma. You were the perfect subject. The mark didn't find you by chance. Something cracked in me then. Not just anger, something deeper. Like my own mind didn't feel safe anymore. I slammed my hand on the table. You watched people die. You let them burn in rituals you knew would fail. What was the plan? Just keep trying until something opened the door. She stood, straightened her blazer. It wasn't about opening the door. It was about making sure we held the key when it opened on its own. Then she said the worst thing of all. You're still part of this, Adam. We still need you. I laughed. A broken, bitter sound. I'm marked by something that eats time and identity, and you want me to stay in the cage with it? She turned toward the door. You're not in the cage. Then she looked over her shoulder. You are the cage. The door clicked shut behind her. I stared at the folder, then at my shaking hands. I thought about Maya. About Edward. About the night my sister fell into that coma. The night the entity first whispered my name. None of it was coincidence. I'd never been free. And now I wasn't sure if I was still me at all. From the inside of my skull, something ancient chuckled. Not yet a scream. Not yet a voice. Just a presence. A pressure. It was waking up. And it was hungry. I hadn't slept in 2 days. The mark on my forearm throbbed like a second heartbeat, dull, then sharp, then dull again. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw faces. Twisting. Burning. Whispering. I needed answers. And there was only one place left that might give them. The old cathedral sat on the outskirts of Virginia, swallowed by vines and silence. Long abandoned. Once a holy place, now hollow. A scar in the woods. This was where Edward first studied under the Vatican's secret order. Before Division 9. Before everything went wrong. I stepped through the cracked wooden doors. The smell hit me, mildew, old wax, something bitter like dried blood. My boots echoed over the stone floor. Rain tapped gently on the shattered stained glass windows. Light came in broken colors. At the altar I found it. A mirror tall and narrow, framed in rusted gold. Covered in dust and ash. Someone had drawn symbols around its base, Latin prayers mixed with something older. The same sigil that burned on my skin glowed faintly at the top. I didn't know what I was doing, but the grimoire page I found in the archive fire said this mirror wasn't just glass. It was a gate, a place between places. I knelt, laid the torn rosary my sister once wore in front of me. Her voice still haunted my dreams. She never screamed during the exorcism. She just stared, as if something inside her was already gone. I lit the last black candle I had, whispered the words, old words, words that scratched at the back of my throat as I said them. Then everything stopped. The candle froze. The wind outside stopped howling. Even my breath felt stuck in my lungs. And in the mirror I saw him. Me. But not me. He stood in the same pose. Same face. Same scar over the brow. But his eyes, they weren't mine. They were pure black, bottomless. Smiling. I couldn't move. My body felt nailed to the ground. You're getting close, the mirror me said. His voice sounded like mine, but deeper, as if layered with 1,000 whispers. What are you? I asked. My voice trembled. He tilted his head, amused. I'm what's growing inside you. What Edward set in motion. What the mark awakens. I shook my head. You're a lie. A hallucination. Then why can I feel you? He said, pressing a hand to the mirror. My skin burned where my mark pulsed in sync. Why does it hurt when I do this? The sigil on my arm flared red. I screamed. You're not stopping it, Adam, he whispered. You're birthing it. Cracks formed in the glass. No, I gasped. I grabbed the rosary. My fingers curled around it so tight the beads bit into my palm. I began chanting, sloppy, desperate. Latin, Hebrew, anything I could remember from the sacred texts. The wind returned, howling like a beast. Candles exploded. The mirror shook. The reflection screamed, not with fear. With rage. You think you can bind what's already inside you. The mirror shattered. A burst of energy knocked me back. I hit a pillar hard and slumped to the ground. Dust rained from the ceiling. Somewhere, a bell tolled once, though no bell tower remained. When I opened my eyes, the mirror was gone. Just fragments on the floor, reflecting dozens of little me's, each with black eyes. I looked down at my arm. The mark was still there, but now it pulsed slower, like it was waiting, and something inside me whispered just once, quiet as a breath. Soon. I staggered to my feet and left the cathedral. Something had changed, and I wasn't sure I could stop it. Not anymore. But I would die trying. Because if I didn't, what came next would make hell look like mercy. The alarm was already wailing when I stepped off the elevator. Archive Black was on fire. Thick smoke poured out from under the steel door at the end of the corridor. Red lights flashed across the walls, casting the hallway in an eerie strobe. It felt like the entire place was pulsing, breathing, choking with something old. Not just fire. Something else. My lungs tightened. I broke into a run. As I approached the vault-like door, I saw 2 Division 9 agents sprawled on the ground. Their throats had been slashed clean, too clean for human hands. Symbols were drawn in their blood, twisting shapes like claws curling inward. The mark on my forearm burned. I knew Edward was here. I pulled the override key from my coat and jammed it into the panel beside the door. The system blinked red, then green. With a hiss and a groan, the door creaked open. Heat hit me in the face like a living thing. Archive Black, once a sealed tomb of ancient books and forbidden knowledge, was now an inferno. Scrolls burned on their shelves. The protective wards drawn in chalk across the floor sizzled and cracked. Some kind of oily shadow darted between the flames, whispering in languages I couldn't recognize. And standing in the middle of it all, his back to me, was Edward. He looked unchanged, like time had refused to touch him. Tall, clean suit, white hair tied back. But his presence felt wrong, like the air around him was twisting in place. "You're late," he said without turning around. "You're killing people, Edward," I said, my voice shaking with heat and fury. "What is this?" He turned slowly. His eyes were black, fully black, like 2 polished stones. No whites, no pupils. Just endless dark. "I'm burning the rot atom," he said, smiling. "The lies we built this place on. The words we were never meant to read." I stepped forward, gripping the binding dagger in my pocket. "You're summoning it, aren't you?" Edward raised a hand and gestured to the walls. Flames danced higher. The books, those ancient grimoires that took lifetimes to translate, crumbled to ash. "You already summoned it, Adam," he said. "When you touched that sigil, when you agreed to work for them, you thought you were a soldier. But you're a door. You've always been a door." I felt something shift in my skull, like a quiet knock on the inside of my mind. He was trying to unhinge me. I backed toward the index vault, the small room within Archive Black where restricted records were stored, away from the main floor. The sprinklers had failed, but maybe, just maybe, some pages were still intact. "You don't understand what you're bringing through," I growled. Edward laughed. "No, I understand perfectly. That's why I'm smiling." I ran. Inside the index vault, smoke had filled the space like a choking blanket, but the fire hadn't reached the far corner yet. I dropped to my knees and tore open a rusted cabinet. The drawers clanged open and shut. Nothing. Nothing. Then, a grimoire page, brittle and yellow, wrapped in a linen cloth and sealed in wax. I ripped it open and scanned the symbols. Latin. Old Latin. I could barely read it, but I caught a phrase. Vincula sanguinum. Porta obscura. Hotia vivit. Blood chains. Dark gate. The host must live. It wasn't a way to destroy Maltareth. It was a way to trap it, in a living vessel. I dropped the page. That's what Edward wanted. Not to release Maltareth into the world. No. He wanted to house it, to wear it like a second skin. Or worse, he wanted me to do it. Behind me, the door burst open. I turned, raising the dagger, ready to fight, to die, to end this. But Edward didn't walk through. Something else did. It was shaped like a man, but its body bent wrong, like it was folded from paper soaked in oil. Its head turned full around. The mark on my arm glowed, matching the sigil on its chest. It smiled at me with a mouth full of teeth too small and too many. I backed into the burning shelves. Smoke filled my lungs. My skin blistered. I raised the dagger and drove it down into my own hand. Pain exploded. The creature howled. A crack split the air like thunder. And just like that, the shadows vanished. The fire dimmed. Edward was gone. And I was alone on my knees, bleeding and gasping in the smoldering remains of the last knowledge that could have saved us all. But I still had the page, burned at the edges, torn, incomplete, and I knew, somehow, that the final ritual was close. Maltareth was coming. And I was still marked. Division 9. The same people who trained me, fed me, trusted me to walk into the darkest corners of the world, they're hunting me now. I see it in their cold eyes, feel it in the tension of every closed door, every silenced radio call. The mark on my forearm burns like fire beneath my coat. It's no longer just a sigil. It pulses. It whispers. Sometimes it moves. I haven't slept in 3 days. The train station outside Baltimore was the last place I felt even remotely human. I changed my coat, shaved my beard, and slipped through a crowd of tired faces heading north. No one noticed the man with the hollow stare and bloody hands. No one looked twice at me. That's when I realized I was already halfway gone. I took the night roads, abandoned lanes, crumbling highways lost to frost and vines. The GPS screamed no signal for hours. It didn't matter. I wasn't following a map. I was following something else. A memory. A whisper. The Vatican outpost in Vermont wasn't supposed to exist anymore. It burned to the ground in 2007 during a containment breach. They said a demon broke loose during an exorcism and tore the place apart. I knew better. That demon had a name, Maltareth. And the man who invited it in was Edward Voss. He once called it the architect. Said it didn't just feed on souls, it fed on time. On history. On truth. I parked my stolen SUV at the edge of the woods and walked the rest of the way. Snow crunched beneath my boots. The trees whispered secrets in a wind that smelled like burnt candles and rust. The closer I got, the heavier the air became. As if the earth itself was trying to warn me, turn back. But I didn't. I couldn't. I found the ruins just before dawn, charred stones, cracked stained glass buried beneath moss and ice. A crooked cross still hung above the blackened doorway, half melted and warped like a face screaming in pain. I stepped inside. The cold was different there. Not natural. It clawed at my lungs, slowed my breath. The floor creaked as I walked across it, bones of the building groaning beneath my weight. But there was something else. A faint light. Flickering. At the far end of the church, past rows of rotting pews, was a stairwell hidden beneath a shattered altar. I remembered it. Years ago, Edward brought me here when I was still a student. He said some things were buried for a reason, and some knowledge was better left untouched. I opened the trapdoor. The air below was warm, almost humid. I climbed down into the dark, my flashlight shaking in my grip. The walls were carved with Latin phrases. Some I could read. Others made my stomach twist just to look at. My fingers brushed the stone as I passed, and the mark on my arm throbbed in reply. The chamber at the bottom was still intact. A circular room. Stone pillars lined the walls, each one etched with seals older than language. In the center sat a shallow pit, and in that pit, a circle. The binding circle. And there it was. The last hope. It was made from crushed bones, black salt, and ash. Ancient symbols drawn in blood that hadn't dried despite the passing years. The circle had held Maltareth once. It could do it again, but only if the vessel willingly stepped inside. I knew what it meant. The vessel was me. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking, stained with dirt and old sins. I touched the edge of the circle. The whispers in my head grew louder, clearer. They spoke in Edward's voice, in Maya's scream, in my sister's soft sobs before she slipped into that coma. They told me things I didn't want to hear. You were never meant to survive, Adam. You were built for this. I sank to my knees. What if this was the only way? What if sealing Maltareth inside me, trapping it with this flesh and bone, was the only way to stop what Edward was planning? What if dying wasn't enough? I looked at the circle again, at its cruel beauty. A cage drawn by those who once danced too close to the fire and lived long enough to regret it. I could feel Maltareth's breath on my neck even now, even underground, even in the dark. It wanted out, and Edward, he was nearly ready to open the last gate. I saw it in my dreams. I saw the Capitol rot, the sky fracture, the monuments crumble into dust. The past rewritten, the future erased. Only the scream remained. I lit a single candle and placed it at the edge of the circle. Then I whispered, "Not yet, but soon." I stood, wiped the blood from my nose, and climbed out of the pit. I wasn't ready to die just yet. Not until I dragged Edward into the dark with me. Let the mark burn. Let it scream. I was still in control. For now. They told me the Capitol's crypt was sealed off decades ago. Structural issues, they said. But I've learned to read between the lines. Structural issues meant ritual damage. I'd seen it before, stone groaning like it remembered screams, air heavy with things that weren't human. Now, I stood before that place again. Alone. The elevator wouldn't go down past level 3. I pried open a maintenance shaft, climbed down 4 stories, knees trembling with every echo of metal groaning under my weight. My flashlight flickered, but the mark on my forearm burned steadily, pulsing like it knew where I was heading. Guiding me, or luring me. I couldn't tell anymore. When I dropped into the chamber, I nearly vomited. It wasn't dust that hung in the air, it was ashes. Human ashes. The whole floor was coated in them, ankle deep. Symbols painted in what looked like blood circled the room's edge, crawling up the pillars, twitching like living things when I passed them. And at the center, surrounded by 13 black candles and a circle carved deep into the stone, stood Edward. He looked nothing like the man I once knew. Half his face was bone. The other half was cracked, as if something inside his skin was trying to crawl out. His eyes weren't eyes anymore, just 2 hollow pits glowing with a dim red light. His body moved like it had too many joints. And yet he smiled. "Adam," he said, voice smooth as silk and rotting like spoiled fruit. "You came. You always come when called." "I didn't come for you," I said. "I came to end this." He laughed. The sound echoed like a scream stuck on rewind. "Still pretending you're not part of this? You've had the mark for weeks. You've felt the whispers. You see behind the curtain now. You're already mine." I took a step forward, drawing the circle I'd etched into my skin with a hot iron blade 2 nights ago. The counter ritual. Painful to wear. Deadly to activate. But maybe, just maybe, it could stop him. "You don't control me," I said, though my voice shook. "You think you're chosen, but you're just infected." Edward's smile widened, splitting his cheek. "Oh, Adam, no. I am not infected. I am reborn." He raised his arms, and the candles flared to life. The flames rose high, stretching like tendrils. The air turned electric. My ears popped. Blood dripped from my nose. "You see," he whispered, "Maltareth is not some mindless beast. He is the architect, the builder behind dreams, nightmares, time. You, Adam, are the last stone in the arch." I lunged forward, drawing the blade hidden in my coat. It was silver, engraved with Latin, soaked in blessed oil. He caught my wrist mid-swing. And that's when I felt it. Not his grip, but him. Inside me. The mark on my arm burned white-hot. My head split open with screams, not outside. Inside. 1,000 voices, maybe more, all speaking languages I didn't know but somehow understood. "You've opened the gate," Edward whispered. "Now watch what walks through." I dropped to my knees. The circle around us flared, and from the cracks in the floor came shadows. Tall, thin, stilted shadows, crawling upward with jerking limbs and grinning mouths that stretched too far. The temperature dropped. My breath became fog. One shadow reached for me. I drove the silver blade into my own chest. Pain exploded. The mark howled. A burst of blue-white light flooded the room, slicing through the shadows, freezing them in mid-motion. Edward shrieked, stumbling backward, face cracking open further, revealing not flesh but lightless space. "You fool," he gasped. I pulled the blade free, blood pouring down my front. The circle beneath us changed. It wasn't his anymore. The counter-ritual had worked. The symbols twisted, reformed, locking Edward inside. "I may be a fool," I said, gasping, "but I'm still human." "You gave that up." The light surged. Edward screamed. No, Maltareth screamed through him, the sound ancient and wrong. I collapsed as the stone shook. The shadows shrieked and vanished. Edward was pulled into the earth, piece by piece, his hands clawing the stone, face melting into oblivion. Then silence. I lay on the floor, bleeding, heart slowing. I should have died. But the mark, it still burned. Dimly now. Softly. Like it was sleeping. Not gone. Just waiting. I closed my eyes, not knowing if I'd wake up. But one thing was certain. This wasn't over. Not yet. I stood in the heart of the crypt, where the air was colder than death. My breath fogged in front of me, but it wasn't just from the cold. It was from the presence of something old. The ceiling above groaned like it remembered another time, long before this building was built, long before America was even carved from blood and dreams. Candles flickered all around me, hundreds of them, casting long shadows that moved even when I didn't. Edward stood on the raised platform ahead. His skin was pale and stretched thin, like parchment soaked in oil. Veins pulsed black across his face. His eyes, those used to be human. Now they looked hollow, filled with a reddish mist that swirled like smoke behind glass. "You came," he said softly. "I hoped the mark would guide you back." The sigil on my forearm was glowing. It burned not like fire, but like something crawling beneath the skin, threading itself through my nerves deeper into my chest. It hurt to breathe. "You summoned something you don't understand," I said. My voice cracked. "It's inside both of us now." Edward chuckled, low and tired. "No, Adam. I understand it perfectly. Maltareth is not just a demon. He's memory, pure, raw, unfiltered memory. He will return us to truth." He stepped aside, revealing a massive circle carved into the stone. Blood filled the lines, still fresh. In the center, something shimmered, a hole in reality, twisting slowly like a whirlpool of shadows. "I won't let him through," I said, stepping forward. My fingers curled around the rosary I'd taken from Maya's broken body. The beads felt warm now, as if remembering her final scream. Edward tilted his head. "You were always the final key. Your mark is the lock, and the door." The mark on my arm surged. I dropped to my knees, coughing violently. Blood spattered the floor. I felt my thoughts slipping like sand through a sieve. I wasn't just in my own head anymore. Whispers filled the chamber. 100 voices layered atop each other. Some spoke Latin. Some hissed in guttural tones I'd only heard in dreams. And one voice, one deep, slow voice, spoke my name. "Adam." I looked up. Edward was gone. His body had collapsed into ash, drifting into the circle. And now, from the whirlpool of shadow, something was climbing out. It didn't have a shape. It moved like liquid nightmare. Faces floated within it, screaming silently. I saw Maya. I saw my sister. I saw myself, older, burned broken. I took the grimoire page and the rosary and stepped into the circle. The moment I did, fire exploded around me, but it didn't burn. It opened. I felt my soul peel open like paper in the wind. The demon surged toward me, hungry. I screamed, not in fear, but in fury. I shouted the ancient words. Words no human should ever speak. I could feel the walls of the crypt crack. The circle lit with a white light, blinding and pure. The demon roared. My heart thudded once. Then again. Then stopped. And everything fell silent. I opened my eyes. The crypt was empty. Cold. Dead. The circle was sealed. But I was still here. Still breathing. And the mark still burned on my arm. I reached up and touched my face. It felt different. My skin had changed. Warmer. Smoother. I looked into a broken mirror beside the altar. My eyes weren't mine anymore. They glowed faintly red. Maltareth hadn't escaped. I stopped him from coming through. But I realized something in that quiet, hollow moment. He didn't need to escape. He just needed a place to hide. And now, I was the cage. I turned from the mirror and walked up the stairs back into the world. The sun was rising over DC, gold and blinding. The city was waking. And I was no longer just Adam Raines. I was something else. Something watching. Waiting.